Hello, everybody. Welcome to the historic Oddfellows building in downtown Calgary, home to SAIT's new School for Advanced Digital Technology. My name is Jim Gibson, and I'm the Chief Catalyst here at SAIT. In the very near future, I can't wait to have you gather here in this amazing building. For those of you who know me, the act of gathering is really to build consensus and trust and community. It's integral to creating those critical conditions for a healthy ecosystem. As such, I want to acknowledge the land that I stand on here today has been a gathering place for people and ideas for thousands of years. We are here in the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Kainai, the Siksika, the Piikani First Nations, as well as the Blackfeet of Montana. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nations of Alberta, Region 3. This building has hosted many communities in its lifetime, from the Oddfellows, merging into the chambers, the Calgary City Chamber of Commerce, making its way to the Rainforest Home, Lunch Without a Lunch, and then morphing into the incubation space that later will become Platforms Innovation Center, which is opening its doors in the East Village very soon. In the spirit of this constant evolution, it is now home to SAIT's urban campus. Our mission here is to teach and empower people to not only compete, but thrive in the digital economy. So why are we here today? Because building a digital society isn't only about launching a school. Building a truly digital society requires a movement. So that begs the question, what does the digital talent of tomorrow look like? And how do we work together at a transformative scale to create it? That's why I've asked you here today. Calgary Economic Development recognized that digital talent and talent was one of the key pillars of its economic strategy. Mr. David Bissett recognized the need for digital talent engine and directed a major gift to SAIT to stand up SAIT. This is the challenge of our era. Finding, fostering, and scaling this digital talent is a shared, urgent challenge for each and every one of us. Last year, as many of you know, I opened up an email that was titled Chief Catalyst, School for Advanced Digital Technology from one of our local search firms. And I had to open it just because that title really got me, the notion of a chief catalyst, and it's changed my life. The notion of a chief catalyst, the word catalyst, an unusual word, brimming with energy. The act of catalyzing is about getting things started and in motion, that initial burst of energy that ripples to a swell. I love this word. And I want to pause here to remind all of us here on this call and on the Zoom and on the work that you're doing every day that we are all catalysts in igniting this movement. When Brad Zumwalt and I and the group from the A100 and a group of other fellow Calgarians started the Rainforest movement, we realized that to begin this community, we had to create a conversation and a shared context for what was happening in the world. And just like then, today, we're not here to prescribe, but here to start a shared conversation and collectively catalyze a movement towards building a digital talent ecosystem focused on nurturing a level of digital intelligence across generations, across sectors, across industries, where everybody can share in the promise of a successful digital society. You can expect three things today. We're going to connect ourselves into a global movement and learn what others have faced when they looked at the challenges of digital talent face on. Second, we're going to have a conversation with the local leaders of the talent ecosystem and have a conversation about the work that they're doing. And finally, we're going to seed this movement. We're going to start and release something that we're calling the Digital Ecosystem Talent Playbook. I'm very excited to begin this work together. There's so much to be done. Being digital means we can teach people how to code. We can teach people how to be a data scientist. As my new friend, Alex Sarian, the CEO of Arts Commons, said to me the other day, digital can also mean pushing the boundaries of the performing arts as a creator. So how do we define this North Star? How do we create the work that will solve this Herculean effort? Well, we have some examples on here to help us. We're lucky that we can draw upon global examples of regional collective efforts whose experience we can draw upon to teach us as we embark on our own journey. With that, I'm absolutely honored today to introduce today's keynote, Sir Peter Estlin. Following a 35-year career in banking and finance with Barclays, Citigroup, and Coopers & Lybrand in London, Hong Kong, Singapore, and New York, Peter was the 691st Lord Mayor of the City of London in 2018-2019. His mayoral theme was shaping tomorrow's city today, promoting innovation alongside championing digital skills. Peter now holds several non-executive appointments, including being an independent director of Rothschilds & Co. He's chair of Future.now, a coalition of business and organizations working together to boost digital skills across the UK. Also chair of the Association of Apprentices, a national membership body for apprentices across the UK, and a member of the Audit and Risk Committee of His Majesty's Treasury. Peter is married to Lindy for over 30 years, and they have 3 adult children. His passions include skiing, cooking, wine, and chocolate, sometimes all at the same time, I'm told. Welcome, Peter, from London. I really appreciate you joining us here today.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for those kind words of introduction. And as you said, I am a big lover of skiing, and particularly in Whistler. But that's perhaps for another day. In preparing for this keynote, I wanted to look at what was in common between Calgary, London, and Singapore. And there's a huge amount of innovation taking place, but also quite a lot of infrastructure development. And I saw recently in the newspapers in Singapore that they had to call in archaeologists as part of a local reclamation, because 10 meters down, they had found some copper wire. And with the help of students from the National University of Singapore, they realized that 1,000 years ago, Singaporeans had a telephonic network. Now, not to be outdone, London revealed that during the building of Crossrail recently, they had uncovered 20 meters down some ancient fiber optic cable. And researchers from Imperial College conclusively publicized the fact that London, 1,000 years earlier than Singapore, had an advanced telecommunications network. But I've also now found out that in Calgary, just off Miller Avenue, as part of the sort of innovation and infrastructure for SAIT University, that actually engineers digging down 50 meters found absolutely nothing. But with the help of researchers, they concluded emphatically that Canadians in Calgary, all those years ago, were using Wi-Fi technology. Now, a bit of a joke, but to me, ladies and gentlemen, I think it sets the scene for tonight, which is about innovation. It is about looking at the impact of innovation. It's not a competitive agenda, but one that actually seeks to operate in a collaborative way. But if I may set the scene and take our minds briefly back to the late 18th century. We're in England and we have the onset of the Industrial Revolution. But as we move into the 19th century, one of the big challenges of the Industrial Revolution is the demand for talent, because machinery now requires talent and labor force to use this technology. And so towards the end of the 19th century in the UK, government introduces the Elementary Education Act, which introduces the 3 R's. The recognition that there is a need for knowledge in the workforce in order to use this, the tools that are being developed. So we start to recognize the importance of education in the development of talent. And at the turn of the century, that is codified in what is now ubiquitously be called IQ, the intellectual quotient, the sort of the assessment of our ability to capture knowledge as human beings. But fast forward, if I may, several decades towards the end of the 20th century, we're going through another economic boom led by computing and the latest elements of technology. But at the same time, researchers prove that actually performance in business is not driven solely by the intellect of talent, but actually by our emotional intelligence, our EQ. And so we now establish that actually businesses and leadership that expose those elements of emotional intelligence are actually higher performer businesses. But of course, as we all know, over the last several years, the pace of change has continued to develop rapidly. And as a result, what we now see is the impact of that and the recognition that digital skills are now critical to economic growth. But let's pause there, because in practice, we've all been exposed over the last year to the impact of COVID. And if nothing else, COVID, I think, has revealed the dependency on technology, whether through isolation and the importance of telecommunications and video like this, but online shopping and access to entertainment, and many critical services. But one of the challenges that has presented is that whilst the knowledge of that capability is widely disseminated, we have a challenge in that we have a lack of skills in much of the workforce. Alongside that, of course, we are seeing significant tilts in society's understanding of our values, whether it is through Black Lives Matter, the recognition and the importance of ESG. And so alongside the construct of knowledge and values and skills is this sort of educational triangle. But in the UK, and certainly my experience is that around the world, the pace of change is exacerbating the tensions within this educational model. You know, we're seeing this huge level of innovation in business, but a dislocation in the ability of our education systems to keep pace with that level of innovation. And specifically in the UK, Lloyds Banking Group 2 or 3 years ago set to leverage data of effectively transactional data in the UK economy to look at what they've created as a consumer digital index. And that index is pointing to the recognition that some 17 million people, half of the UK's workforce, do not have the digital skills necessary both to live and work in today's society. So it presents a major challenge, an economic challenge, but also a social challenge as we risk creating a very much a divided society. And if we go back a few years, we had the same issue with sort of financial capabilities. We ended up risking having people within society who were financially excluded. And there was a big push across industry, across government to address that. But the scale and pace of change that we're now seeing, particularly in the advent of technology, is creating what I see as a divided society within the UK, with a large proportion having the talent to engage in AI and quantum computing and robotics, but many, over half, not having the skills to be able to access that. So what has been done about it? Well, internationally, DQ has now been recognized as sort of a global standard for digital intelligence, led by Yoshin Park in Singapore. And the DQ Institute is very much promoting that as a global standard across countries, but also across industries and through educational leadership. One might say, sadly, in the UK, we haven't formally adopted DQ, but we have recognised our own sort of standards through what we are now calling the essential digital skills. We've effectively boiled down the DQ into 5 core elements. So we've identified what I will call the basic standards. The challenge we face now in the UK, however, is adoption. And that's very much really at the heart of the work that we set about in the formation of Future.now. And what Future.now is, bluntly, is an organisation that has really been formed through a business collaboration. One of the pleasures of being Lord Mayor, in many ways, I wouldn't say one is the chief catalyst of the City of London, but one does have the ability through history and through the legacy. One lives in a rather large house in the centre of the City of London called Mansion House. And it's a house that many people want to come and visit. So convening is a tremendous ability of the mayoralty. And so I was able to pull together particularly 5 organisations, British Telecom, Lloyds Banking Group, Accenture, Nominet, and Good Things Foundation, and then more recently PwC. And as a group, we said, how are we going to tackle what effectively is this digital poverty in the UK? And so we have effectively developed a mechanism to identify what is now the hidden middle. And we've identified, as I said, some 17.1 million people who do not have those foundation skills, those essential digital skills to live and operate. But as a group of businesses, we have set upon ourselves as a mission to tackle that by creating an impetus for change, a community across not only London, but other cities around the UK, whereby working together, by co-creating, by collaborating, we are sharing the tools that actually exist, but at the end of the day are not really being adopted by either consumers or by employees. I have to say it's challenging. Clearly there is an emotional gap that we're having to bridge in terms of focusing on what ultimately is the motivation. Why do people need to do this? The government itself has recognised that, in the sense that it's published most recently a sort of a white paper, which is sort of an indication to set some new legislation, where they've looked at this as effectively skills for jobs or jobs for skills, and really looking to introduce the concept of lifelong learning, the ability of people to recognise that leaving school is not just the end of one's education, but actually a need now to regularly embark on forms of skills education throughout one's life. So through Future.now, we've grown our coalition now to over 160 businesses, with some 2 million employees within that coalition. But those businesses also reach out to some 10 to 20 million consumers across the UK. And our aim is, simply put, to work with businesses, collaborating and sharing our tools, sharing our directories, our playbook, with a view to instilling those skills within our workforce and within our communities. Now, at one end of the spectrum, and I shared with you briefly what we refer to as the hidden middle, we have those that clearly have advanced digital skills through our own colleges like Ada. But at the other end of the spectrum, those who've been digitally excluded, digitally isolated. And that was certainly a major priority last year, as we sought to ensure that those who were not connected to the internet had some form of access, not least to access our health services. But the challenge we face at the moment is very much to tackle this hidden middle, because whilst we're advancing rapidly to the left and we are looking to protect the digitally excluded, this hidden middle is growing significantly. So it is very much working together. I often refer to it as a jigsaw, in as much as We have pieces all over the country, but we don't have a picture. We now have the picture in the form of the Essential Digital Skills Framework. And so it's a question of putting those pieces back into the jigsaw. So really what I wanted to close on is really to encourage you in Calgary to embrace and come together as a community as you see the changes taking place in your own industries. But more importantly, to put an offer of collaboration between London and Calgary to see how we can work together to support what you're doing, to share ideas, to learn ultimately from what you might do as we all leapfrog each other as we move forward. So I think it's a brilliant opportunity. I'm delighted, and my thanks to Accenture and to Jim for hosting this evening. As I say, I think it is a real opportunity for businesses and organizations to come together to actually shape where we're going. And as I often said during my mayoralty, we can let the future shape us, or we can shape it. And on that basis, Jim, or maybe Susa, I hand back to you. Thank you very much.
Sir Peter, thank you very, very much for your kind words and your thoughtful words. When we first met several months ago, I knew we had a fellow traveler. You were part of a tribe of people that recognize not just the challenges of digital skills, but the reality of not leaving people behind, both on your chart on the far left, but also this incredible group called the invisible middle. This is now a language and a vocabulary that we're starting to embed into our thinking. And I really appreciate the insights that you've given and your offer of collaboration, because this journey has only just begun. We have a large swath of our populations, both here in Canada and Calgary, but also all over the world, that we can't have a true digital society without everyone sharing in the benefits. So your experience has been delightful. I really appreciate it. And we'll be over there to see you, I can guarantee you, very soon. London and the UK is one of my favorite places on the planet. And I will take seriously your offer of the open collaboration. So I can't thank you enough for joining us. It's late in London. It's about 8:30, I guess, your time. And I'm really delighted that you joined us. We'll see you here soon.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you, Sir Peter. I just wanted to reflect very quickly on the call by Sir Peter to talk about this invisible middle and what we have called at SAIT the future disenfranchised. It's the reason why we're having this conversation here today. You know, we've stood up a school. We will have the digital programming and the programs for teaching specific skills. We have to do all of those things. But one of the things that we can't forget is this future disenfranchised. And the only way we can fix that and work with that is that if we have the shared conversation together. So thank you again to Sir Peter for those wonderful words. I want to take a moment to invite our next guest, who I'm just honored and delighted to have met her over the years and spend some time with her over the last little bit in preparing this. Sula Stathakis, the Managing Director, Talent and Organizational and Human Potential at Accenture. Sula has been an absolute champion of our school. She's been there from the very beginning with her team. She loves a bit of chaos and a bit of ambiguity, but it's always there to bring us into focus. And Accenture has been an exceptional partner for SAIT, specifically, and SAIT generally. She's one of the most brilliant minds when looking at systems, leadership, and culture. I'm just honored to have her with us here today, so thank you very much. Sula's bringing together some leading voices and opinions from across Calgary. And she's going to be joined by Chris Foster, who's the VP and Chief Innovation Officer of TC Energy, Cord Ellingson, the VP of Research and Strategy at Calgary Economic Development, Greg Hart, partner Thin Air Labs and co-founder of Inception U, Tim Wong, who's the lead for industry solutions at Unity, and Joanne Pittman, Superintendent School Improvement at Calgary Board of Education. And Sir Peter's going to join us for a conversation led by Sula Welcome, Sulith, and thanks for joining us.
I am delighted to be here, Jim. Thank you for that warm introduction. I feel like I should maybe jump right to the roundtable so as not to say anything that shows otherwise. But I will just start with one quick moment of gratitude to SAIT and to the school and the opportunity for us at Accenture to collaborate and feel like we, from before even the school was launched, that we're moving forward to this milestone event today and helping be at the center of the mission for SAIT, New World, New Thinking. And with that in mind, I am going to actually move directly into the roundtable discussion. I'm delighted to kick off the conversation with this formidable roundtable, and I am going to start with Chris Foster. Chris, you're a digital disruptor in one of Canada's largest energy companies. How do you define digital, and what does it mean to your organization?
Yeah, thanks, Sula, and thanks everyone for having me. I mean, I tend to keep it pretty simple. I mean, to me, digital is about, solving business problems with technology. And I think if you've been on IT for long enough, you'd say, well, we've been doing that for a long time. Those of us that have been in the industry for a while. I think the difference and the reason people are more excited about it, and there's a lot of hype around it, is it's not just solving business problems, it's actually creating entirely new business models in cases. And everyone's heard the stories of Netflix and Uber many, many times, but it's, that's the difference. We're actually solving problems that no one knew were problems 5-10 years ago. I didn't know it was a problem getting a taxi, and Uber told me there's a better way to do it. I had no idea. And so I think that's the big difference. I always, whenever people ask me or they talk about digital technology, the one thing I do always remind people is it's not actually about the technology. And so I use the examples of Netflix and Uber within, TC Energy to actually talk about the art of the possible, to talk about the fact that there are other ways of doing it. It's not about the technology. Taxi companies actually had the same technology, didn't apply it the way Uber did. So it's not the technology that leads, it's the thinking and the creativity and the curiosity about how you solve problems.
Oh, I love that. That's the art of the possible, Chris. That's a phrase that will, I'm sure, resonate with many and come up as a theme throughout this. Tim, I'm going to ask you a question here about talent. You say that you work with some of the most talented and passionate people in the world. Can you describe what talent means to you and the role it plays in enabling emerging technologies? And
for sure.
Yeah, in doing so, maybe describe a little bit about what you do as well, Tim.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, my name is Tim Wong. I am the solutions lead at Unity. So I lead our professional services team as we work with clients across sectors to solve business problems with digital technologies. And for some of you, you might know Unity as a game engine. And what we're doing is taking our platform and what we've learned in the game space, and we're applying it into the industrial space. And so, coming into Calgary, this is one of the key things that we want to do is one, tap into the talent pool here, but also there's just such an opportunity for digital transformation in Calgary, and we want to be a part of that journey. And so to answer the question, talent is going to mean different things to different businesses, but for us at Unity, we have a fundamental belief that the world is a better place with more creators in it. So we kind of see talent in that lens. And when we think about the solutions group that I'm part of, when we see talent, we think about our teams that we build up to work on projects. It's really, in kind of a diamond shape where it's the convergence of our business, design, technical, and delivery teams. And it's when they start to come together, there's friction, there's kind of creativity that comes out of that. That's kind of how we structure our teams. And so when we look at talent, it's really at the convergence of those different things coming together.
All right. Thanks, Tim. I've got a bit of a delay, so I hope that's okay here.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. All right. I love that idea that the world is a better place with creators in it. And with that in mind, Joanne, as superintendent for school improvement, how is the Calgary Board of Education thinking about the role of digital in the K-12 curriculum, or even, even building off Tim's idea, a future of creators to enable us in this space?
Thanks so much, Sula. I've really appreciated hearing the perspectives in so many different contexts, and certainly in a K-12 environment. Right now, at this point, we have in Alberta an ICT curriculum that was last refreshed in the year 2000. And you can appreciate the content therein is not at all aligned with our current reality. And fundamentally, the role of digital in a K-12 environment sits and fits around both content as it relates to access and engagement, also with respect to instructional design and how that process of instructional design is centered to reinforce those same things. And then I'd like to introduce a new concept, and Chris, I appreciate your reference around, digital is solving business with tech and creating new business models. As we look at it from a K-12 perspective, it really is about understanding the impact of being immersed in a digital environment and setting around wellness and that understanding of inclusion through the digital environment and what that opportunity is. That requires some shifts. And we're really excited about some ongoing, very specific entry points and opportunities within the Calgary Board of Education. And I would say it's available across the province, really, to look at understanding and building off of the strength of what has come in the past, but really opening up to, it isn't about discrete skills. It's not about separate items. It is about concepts, competencies, and connection. And as a design from an instructional standpoint, we must reinforce those elements across all grade levels as developmentally appropriate.
Oh, isn't that great? I love this idea of immersion in a digital environment, and how, as you watch kids coming up through the school system now and preparing for this new world, new thinking, that is a critical component of all of it. And so with that in mind, Greg, let me ask you to tell us about the work you do to develop skills for tomorrow that are necessary for what you describe as future fit citizens.
Yeah, thanks, Sula. I agree. It's great to hear so many different perspectives. And I think the future fit citizens piece is, well, there's two parts to it, right? One is the citizens piece and one is the future fit part. And the citizens piece is really an acknowledgement of the fact that we are not apart from the world. We are a part of the world. And this is something that we need to get in closer touch with in order to be successful in the future. And I mean, our Indigenous friends know all about this. It's the way that they've always looked at the world. And we need to inject a lot more of that into the way that we approach the future. So then that brings me to the future fit part, which is, sometimes you hear the language of future proof, as if we can put on a bunch of armor or something to protect ourselves from what's going to happen next. But with so much uncertainty about what that's going to exactly look like and how quickly it's going to happen, it's not an effective way to deal with the future. Instead, it's more a question of how do we fit into the future. So in other words, how do we have the competencies that are required to be successful in the future? And so whether it's the work that we do with our companies in Thin Air or the work we do with learners in Inception U, it's all about trying to create the conditions, primarily through a design-focused approach, to get people into a position where they can be fit for the future, that they have the competencies that are required to be successful.
This is great. And I'm really intrigued by this ongoing theme that's developing around skills and competencies. So I may loop back on some of those questions. Joanne's brought it up. You did as well, Greg. And it really is something that is intriguing and will require quite a bit of work to start to think about how we define that in a common way. Sir Peter, if I can ask you again, the city of London is ahead of the city of Calgary in many ways, especially around championing digital skills at scale, as you've described. And you've talked about, we'll maybe come back to some lessons learned for us to think about as we progress through the conversation, but let's start with talking about what are the benefits that the UK is experiencing. Could you build off of what you're seeing in the boost of digital talent and what you've been able to do in a short period of time?
Well, I think I would have to say, Sula, I'm not sure we're that far ahead listening to some of the conversation today. And whether it's from the educational angle or from the business agenda. So I think in many ways we're going through a lot of common elements here. But I'd pick up two threads. Firstly, as Joe was highlighting, all the way through society, whether it's in school, whether it's in business, or even for now, those who've left work, the recognition that skills, as opposed to sort of knowledge-based learning, skills and experiential learning are so important. And I love her phraseology of concepts, competencies, and connections, because at the end of the day, it is about that element as human beings of being able to co-create, but also to have that resilience. So I think one of the things, we are learning is that it's less about pure knowledge. Knowledge now is much easier to access, but actually developing skills and experiences is critical. And the benefits that's having is ultimately talent attracts talent. It attracts capital. So, I mean, the scale of innovation that's taking place in the UK, I mean, a lot of it through London, but it's across Manchester, Bristol, Cambridge. It is that sense that people, and it's a human element here, people want to be at the forefront. They want a sense of excitement. And so, to some extent, most human beings, even from the early ages, we look at skills as something that we have to access. So the benefits, as I said, are fundamentally there's real economic growth, and that scale of innovation is not just in financial services, which is often what London is associated with. It's in biotech, it's in engineering, it's in energy, it's in batteries, but it's also fueled by the links to the universities. And it's that ecosystem of connecting business with the community, with government and with universities. It's connecting the whole thing together that is so powerful. So, as I said, I'm not sure we're that far ahead. And if we are, it's a game of leapfrog. So you need to go ahead and then we catch up again.
I feel like you're giving us a challenge, Sir Peter. That's excellent, and I know Calgary's up for it.
Well, we all like a challenge, Sula. We've just beaten Germany in the World Cup, and it's taken us about 65 years.
It wouldn't be a round table without the mention of soccer or football. So, building on what the City of London is doing, Joe, I'm going to come back to you with the next question and talk a little bit around, as was just mentioned, we're all really excited about the concepts, competencies, and connection framework that you identified. And I have one through the work that the Playbook's done around the framework for digital literacy, skills, and readiness as a different one. But maybe you can talk about the development of that a little further and the adoption and how that in the K-12 environment sets up kids, children, and all of our society for post-secondary and a continuous learning growth mindset to make them successful in this new world.
Yeah, as I think about what it is to be prepared, there's always this interesting dichotomy of both being prepared and also living right now. And so when we talk about frameworks and preparing students, we need to acknowledge where students are and look at things from a developmentally appropriate construct. And a framework really helps do that. it also helps school systems prioritize resources, because we know with all of this change that there's important capacity building that must go along with it to really provide teachers as well and support staff in understanding that particular environment. Something that's been so exciting is working together with Jim and his team around what that looks like at different ages and stages. And we've had an outstanding history together of leveraging different, whether it be dual credit or various career pathways, that while they have essentially started from a perspective of very specific and discrete skill development, they are starting to expand. And we're really able to, through a common framework, create efficient pathways that are sustainable, that aren't just solely dependent on one individual's good idea or commitment or excitement. Because from an education system standpoint, and when you think of the largest system in Western Canada, we really are looking to see where we can leverage sustainability and a framework and alignment with post-secondary, as well as a direct relationship, whether it be through internships, mentorships at different levels with the corporate world, is an incredible opportunity. And the energy within the city of Calgary to engage in that and working, whether it be with various corporations, with post-secondary, or in fact directly, as I look at Court here on my screen, thinking about the work we've done with Calgary Economic Development Council, really wanting to push the envelope there. The sky is the limit if we are prepared to find those developmentally appropriate entry points, prioritize them, and understand the common framework that connects us all.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you brought up energy in Calgary, and so in Court, I'm going to ask you the next question. You've led research and strategy for the last 7 years at Calgary Economic Development. What's an ecosystem model for digital talent? Why is this so important to the future of Calgary?
Well, of course, it's so that we can leapfrog London. I think that, in discussing an ecosystem, I think you have a great example of, how it can be levered for, the power that it has in looking at the people that are around the table today. You're looking at an example of our ecosystem in Calgary, just a small sliver of our ecosystem. Why it's incredibly important. Calgary is, perhaps at a precipice, at a tipping point. Economically, we're going through some pretty rapid economic changes here in Calgary, and maybe the way we used to approach things is that through job descriptions and occupations was maybe a little bit more kind of cut and dried in understanding how we approached it and how we approached our learning system and how we engaged with work. But that's not how the world works anymore, as we have heard everybody around the table speak today. Only through the power of an ecosystem can we really truly harness what we have in our community. We have to open source our learning environment so that everybody has an opportunity to participate and contribute. If we're not opening, accessing, allowing everybody to participate, we're not realizing the full potential of our city. And only through an ecosystem approach and through everybody's different opportunities for people to gain skills and competencies and experiences and bring them together in new ways and understand what they mean and apply them in a way that's fundamentally commonly understood across society. Only then can we really kind of get through. And I guess what I'll say a little bit like what Sir Peter was saying, that as a city, we can either be the disrupted or we can be the disruptors. With an ecosystem approach to digital talent, we can be the disruptors.
I love that. And I think all of us would agree that's where we want to be. And in leading disruption, we know that there's quite a bit of hard work involved. So Tim, maybe I can ask you the question from your perspective. What is some of the hard work ahead of us? I know Sir Peter's alluded to what they've done in the City of London, but you're in Calgary now, your Unity's here. What do you see ahead of us that we need to really roll up our sleeves around?
Well, I'll start off with one of the biggest reasons why we came to Calgary is because of the ecosystem, because of the support that we have from the local, provincial, and federal government, and just the diversity of businesses in Calgary in general. I think, and also the quality of life. I think that's what attracted us to Calgary, and I think locally we believe that Calgary is in this shift where digital transformation is kind of is going to be all around us, right? But I think one of the hardest things now is how do we accelerate together as an ecosystem? And I love that Joe is part of this conversation as well, because when we're talking about talent, when we're talking about digital, it's not just about the current people that's ready to enter the workforce. It's really how are we home growing the talent from K to 12 as well. And so, for us, as a tech platform company, we're also needing to focus on how can we enable creators that aren't technical so that they can also build and create meaningful experiences. And so the hard part now is accelerating together. I think Calgary has all the foundational pieces in place. So how do we accelerate together, move quickly, and also how do we tell the world that Calgary is in the middle of a shift? That we're ready to become a tech hub, that we're ready to have startups invest in Calgary to grow that talent as well.
That's fantastic, in the sense of the types of questions and that idea of accelerating quickly, especially out to the global platform, shall we say, in that it's, COVID has accelerated, and we've seen this with many of our clients, accelerated digital adoption. And likewise, as a result, that competition for talent across the world, it is changing the way the world's going to be operating as we move forward, and the war for talent, as many people like to call it. So with that in mind, Court, how do we open more pathways for digital skills, especially for people who are underrepresented, as one example here within Calgary?
Yeah, thanks, Sula. That's a great question. I think Joe had a really good comment earlier in talking about appropriate entry points. So when we're talking about essential competencies and where are we reaching out to people, I think it's important that we think, all of us are thinking about, where we have our partnerships and where we're building partnerships, and think about those partnerships that we don't have. And how can we fill out our partnerships? I think we should challenge our traditional approaches to how we reach out to community, how we communicate, how we market what it is that we have to offer. I think that we should evolve our agencies and our institutions to be more welcoming and make efforts to meet people in their place. It's not enough to, stand there and open your door and hope that people are going to walk in, but you have to go out into the street and meet people where they are. That's what it means to truly be welcoming. And I think we also need to be much more open-minded in recognizing the existing skills and competencies that we have in our community. I think sometimes we have blinders on where people have learned their skills, the experiences that they have, and thinking that they may not, match or be appropriate to what we're looking for. And I think we need to take those blinders off and understand that, those experiences and skills and competencies are common across people, no matter where they may have come from, and to really open up the potential of our society and bring in the underrepresented into our digital transformation.
Great. Thanks for that, Court. Chris, if I can loop back to you on the same theme and have you describe in your work, how are you bringing together, shall we call it the hidden middle, or the opportunity to increase inclusion, diversity, and the underrepresented in terms of the digital talent you're bringing on board?
Yeah, thanks, Sula. I have to start, though, by saying you need to be grateful that the England-Germany game did not go to extra time, because I think you'd have been down a panelist and a keynote speaker if that had happened. Just going to put that out there. But very happy to be here. And on your question, actually, a few people have brought up the inclusion and diversity point, which it's fabulous to hear, because And Joe brought up internships, which when I think about the role that corporations can play, that's obviously one of the big ones that I'm actually very excited about. We've, I'm old enough to remember when internships were something companies did kind of begrudgingly, and they let you do the filing for the summer and paid you for it. And I've got to tell you, that world has changed completely. When COVID hit, one of the first things that people talked about, unfortunately, was, well, we're probably going to have to let our internship student programs go this year. And I was pushing very, very strongly and very proud to say we didn't let them go. We actually carried on. Of course, it looked different, like everything did in this world. But those internships are now 8, 12, 16-month interviews, and we're actively hiring those people. And when you talk about inclusion and diversity, there's often I'll call it an excuse. I don't mean to be confrontational about it, but an excuse that perhaps you might hear from people like me that says, well, I'm trying to include, be more inclusive. I'm trying to bring, gender diversity and other diversity into my ranks. But hey, when I turn around and interview people, they all look like me, right? You've got to start somewhere. And what I often say to my HR people is we've got to build, that can't be the excuse. Okay, if we just have to start earlier, and we have to look at every stage of what we're doing. And it's not just about the internship programs, but that's a great place to bring in inclusion and diversity to actually create for the future that you want to have, right? And so I love to hear the focus people are putting on that today. Because it means that excuse just won't be possible 5 to 10 years from now. My successors and those who come after me won't be able to say that, and that's exactly as it should be. And of course, as we all know, when you bring in that inclusion and diversity, you get better results. It's just the smart thing to do. There's no data anywhere that says if you fill a room with people that look like me, you get better outcomes than if it's a room full of people that are very, very different and diverse and everything else. So I think it's great to see that part of it, and it's a great opportunity for people to change the organizations, do what's right, but also do what's smart.
Yeah, hey, that's music to my ears, Chris. I am fully committed to inclusion and diversity, and we work quite closely with NPower as one example in terms of our ability not only to upskill, but also hire in. And the talent that's joined our firm from NPower alone has been tremendous, as well as many other organizations. So I'm all for this. So I love to hear that if we get there in 5 years, I will be thrilled. Might take a little longer as well, but 5 years is a great milestone. Greg, let me maybe loop back to you a little bit around this concept of innovation of ways and the language of the future, and what we need to be preparing for in terms of the changes we need to think about from a culture perspective, potentially the plays that we need to be preparing for. Can I ask you that kind of broad question and have you maybe describe a little bit about either the language of the future and or the innovative ways we need to be thinking?
Yeah, sure. I think that, when we talk about the innovation of ways versus the innovation of things, there's a lot of power in the ways conversation, because it actually leads us to things that are more essential and regenerative instead of worrying about objects. We actually put ourselves inside it as part of a process that's ongoing. So I think even the shift to that kind of thinking, that way of looking at the world, is different. And if we even tie that to education, traditionally education is very object oriented. It is about things. It's exchanging test results for certificates and things like that. But if we move to a more pure learning environment where there's lots of experimentation, and we're clear about what the challenges are that we really need to be tackling, that purposefulness is of immense importance. And we have some huge challenges before us, both locally and globally, including climate emergency, but also including, the reworking of capitalism and a bunch of other things that are going to require us to understand how to act inside the system and how to change the way of doing things. That's really crucial. And, as much as we like to talk about technologies and how they're shifting and things are moving quickly, there are still some very fundamental truths that run right through the human experience that don't go away just because we start interacting through Zoom or whatever. And so part of this way of being in the future has to be something that solves for that. So in other words, that, you know, a lot of the things that we would look at today and say are not good outcomes in society, you know, things like a simple example being the sort of hyper fragmentation that's occurring around, you know, political issues or anything else. We have to find a way to behave together that allows us to get past those things, because they block us on progress against some really significant challenges. So that's true whether we're acting as a society. It's true whether we're acting as a venture. You know, it's all the way down. And I mean, that whole notion of the citizen and that level of engagement, it's a fully nested experience. I'm a citizen in my family. I'm a citizen in my community. I'm a citizen in my venture, you know, and I'm a citizen of the world. And I have responsibilities to find, together with other people, the ways that we can see the future together that's going to give us productive outcomes that, you know, we would all celebrate 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or whatever. And so it's a much more resilient course to look for the reliable ways of doing things, rather than just hoping that the next shiny object is going to be the thing that solves all of our problems.
Yeah, that I do love that notion of the ways, the innovation of ways versus the innovation of things. And I've heard you and Jim talk about that a number of times. And so, Court, maybe I can ask you from the role you play and the new economy for the city of Calgary, how does that innovation of ways and that culture change sit as a foundational element to what we do next and where we go as the city of Calgary, especially in the digital economy?
Yeah, I think that innovation of ways is at the core of it, you know, because I think that when it comes to the future of our economy, the truth is that we don't necessarily know what that future is. And so I think it's about that, our way of thinking, our creative approach to thinking, coming together as a community and asking ourselves the challenges that we're trying to face and how do we face those challenges together in creative ways. So it's not that we're necessarily thinking about, you know, by industry anymore, but it's rather, you know, thinking about the broader challenges and solutions that we're trying to face. And that different people have different approaches and that they all bring possibility and opportunity. And so there is a big cultural shift happening in Calgary in how we approach that. And that's it's not easy for a community, I think, to go through that cultural shift in thinking about the ways that we do things, rather than the things that we do. But hopefully with support like the people around the table together today, that we can find our way through it.
Yeah, you got me thinking as you were answering there around this notion of different industries as well, and this whole idea about how much we're seeing where different industries want to learn from the others. I mean, we started the conversation early on with the examples presented around, you know, Chris, you raised that great example of we didn't know we needed Uber until Uber came along, a different way of getting a taxi service. And so different industries are really starting to converge, and we're really tapping into that opportunity. So I know we'll come back to this concept in creative ways. As we're kind of thinking of that in the digital talent ecosystem, Sir Peter, I want to come back to you. If you can share some other lessons from the ones you've already spoken to on how do we need to be thinking about near-term adoption of the ecosystem, the digital talent concepts that we've been discussing here?
Well, I think I would start with where we are this evening. I mean, you've got a fantastic talent pool around you and some superb ideas. I don't know Calgary well, I admit, but I think, to me, there's a set of like-mindedness there. But to Chris's point, there's also a diversity of thinking. And I think getting around the table and collectively There may be one or two other organizations, keep it reasonably small, but actually build and build a nucleus of momentum. And it's amazing how many more businesses will follow suit. But I pick up partly sort of some other aspects to it, in the sense that it is an ecosystem, but you would be building an ecosystem, but an ecosystem within a broader ecosystem. And again, perhaps back to Chris's point around internships or work experiences. We're seeing, let's face it, in the world of work and the way it's changing, and clearly post-COVID, a lot more remote working is going to be taking place. So it becomes a global talent pool. And we're seeing that already in London with people applying for work experiences and even remote jobs from anywhere in the world. Because as long as you end up delivering what you're being asked to deliver, it doesn't matter where you do it from. So I mean, to my mind, the immediacy is one of really embracing the challenge that you see. And I think you've crystallized some of that this evening. But actually, as a group, coming together and saying, right, what pieces can we share? I mean, Tim was talking about some of the elements of what he sees as important. Greg is talking about some of the elements of culture that can feed back into the education system that Joe's got. You've got the leverage of the SAIT of itself. So to my mind, it's getting those people together, and that's what I would encourage you to do. And once that nucleus is formed, and you know it very well, Sula, because I mean your own organization is really adept at doing this. Just by way of brief example, I mean in the UK, this whole concept of movement to work experience was one that Accenture started back in the UK several years ago, and it's still going. So I think that this element of collaboration is one that people get a lot out of it. And each can put their own piece in. So I would encourage you to carry on the conversation and collectively form. I think I can't remember the exact phrase that Jim referred to earlier, but the digital ecosystem talent playbook. But you are the digital ecosystem.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. You really hit the nail on the head there around we're an ecosystem within an ecosystem. And Joe, I'll come back to you around the K-12 space, and how does that concept fit within the work you're doing as well with the education system and the changes for the future?
Well, as I look through my notes, as I'm listening to others talk, and even in preparation for today, ecosystem continues to pop out of my notes. And this question of what are the processes that will best enhance and leverage all who live in that ecosystem and all of the systems that exist therein, however those systems are aligned. I go back to this question of a common framework, and a framework allows for enduring processes to be set in place, as opposed to, and Greg's comment about things and ways. There are many things that pass through education. It's exhausting and it's inefficient. We need to understand and prioritize where flexibility must exist. It can't exist everywhere. And so within an ecosystem and within the education system, where must we prioritize the processes that relate to flexibility and relate to direct connection to both current realities related to work and the economy, as well as future opportunities? And as I listen to others talk, it's there's so many different opportunities there. The test is, can we prioritize them? Can we set them forward in a path that allows someone to send their 5-year-old to school, recognizing that the processes and ways of being will allow them to flex and shift and grow in preparation for their greatest, most fulfilled life. And that is really the work that we're setting forward. And that's not just about a curriculum. It's not just about a school building. It is the ecosystem of interaction within a city. We don't exist as an island, as CBE. We exist as in service to, bringing up and being part of the city. And I think the identification, and I'm excited about this playbook and working through that really intently, because I think it sets us on a path that will create efficiency, action, and results, quite frankly.
I love that. Efficiency, action, and results, priorities, sustainment, that ability to flex and shift and grow. These are exactly the reasons we've come together and we've put the playbook together. And within the ecosystem, Greg, there's a commitment that's required. And that commitment and our ability to come together to accelerate the shift to digital skills is what's in front of us. It'll enable us to have a workforce in Alberta that remains relevant, productive, and employable. So what is that commitment of the ecosystem that we all need to lean into?
I would say the first part of it, and this is, Jim and I have talked about this lots. We used to talk about it with people at the Rainforest meetings quite a lot, but it's one of the weird things that comes with ecosystem thinking. And it's the uncomfortable thing that comes with ecosystem thinking, which is that the health of the ecosystem matters more than anything else. So if you contrast that with a stakeholder environment where, we all show up at a roundtable together, but we all come holding on to the thing that's important to us that we might want to transactionally get. For an ecosystem to function properly, there needs to be somewhat an abandonment of that as being the first thing. And so there's the commitment that's required is the commitment to understanding how ecosystems function and knowing that some parts of that ecosystem necessarily remain slightly fragile in the sense that the whole thing functions better because there might be some fragilities in some certain parts and you let it kind of work its way through. And that's pretty frightening. Especially in a time where an economy is in transition, where you just say, hey, everybody, you're going to come to this thing, you're going to make this contribution to the ecosystem, and we're going to make sure that the ecosystem is healthy, but that might not work out great for you, is part of like the other shoe that drops in that conversation. It's unlikely that that's the case because, more likely you have a robust ecosystem. And if you're committed to it and you're committed to seeing what's happening in the ecosystem and contributing to the fundamental beliefs and values that support it, then the likelihood that you're going to be out of step with that and lose opportunity is extremely low. But it's where humans go. We're pretty fear-based, and so we're always thinking about what could we potentially lose here. And so to me, like in answering that question, that's the fundamental commitment if we want to act in an ecosystem, is that we're contributing to that ecosystem and to keeping it healthy.
That's a great response. Chris, what do you see the role for you going forward in the ecosystem in your organization, building off of what Greg just said?
Yeah, thanks, Sula. I mentioned the internships obviously as being one big thing. We can certainly partner with schools and secondary education to provide those meaningful experiences, which, like I said, we actually hire very heavily from those pools now. It's really changed, and I'm always astonished by, I actually meet the students regularly when they come in, and they don't quite believe me when I tell them on day one, you're going to be doing real work on real teams that really matters, and they kind of look at me like, yeah, okay. And then I see them 3 months later, and they tell me like, I just had to demo to the SVP that machine learning thing that I was working on. I'm like, yeah, no, that's absolutely. So it's creating those opportunities that are. Someone said earlier, I think it was Peter talking about the getting the experiences for people, right? It's great to go to school, and it's fabulous to get training, but if you don't put it to practice, put it to use, that giving people that experience to come in and actually use it, in a real situation is huge. But I think the other thing that hasn't been touched on yet that big corporations, especially like the one I work for, have to do differently in engaging with the ecosystem is how we engage with the vendor community, especially some of the tech startups that we find in Alberta and Calgary and other places. I'll tell you, it's overwhelming, the number of cold calls, cold emails that I get. And so, okay, again, that can always be an excuse to not engage. So you look for other ways to do that, right? We've talked about having an open day where we invite, folks from the local community in to, and kind of a speed dating version of, okay, tell us what you do, tell us what your product's about, and let's see if it's worth having another conversation. And so reimagining lots of those things, because companies like TC and other big companies were pretty hard to penetrate, pretty hard to figure out, well, who do I need to talk to? Who can I get to listen to this opportunity? And so I think we need to, again, someone said meeting people halfway, meeting people where they are. I think that's a lot of what we've got to think about.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. And Tim, likewise, I'll ask you in a similar vein, what are your thoughts around commitment within the ecosystem and preparing for the future of digital skills?
Yeah, for sure. And I want to echo what Greg had mentioned previously as well, in terms of just the commitment of being in it together, that, we come in together with a commitment to action on a bunch of things, and we need to stay committed to that. And I think I do believe that, if we are in it together, the benefits will transfer down to our individual organizations. And so if we put our Calgary hat on, that's kind of what we need to do as an ecosystem. But I also think that, partnerships with educational institutions like SAIT and helping the students there and people that join their programs with the tools that they need, so that when they're out in the workforce, they can build, they can create. We want to be able to do that. We also want to be able to have training programs, so that when there are opportunities for organizations like TC or Greg's organization or CED to use a platform like Unity to build solutions, we want to be able to have opportunity for them to upskill and train onto that platform as well. And furthermore, I think that as organization, we also need to find ways to give back to the community as well. And so establishing ecosystem is not just about focused on tech per se, but how are we benefiting the community as well, and work together to do that. So
yeah, that community mindset brings me back to you, Court, and the work you've done for CED. So likewise, in terms of the commitment of the ecosystem and everyone around the table on this call, what are your thoughts in terms of what commitment means for all of us to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, I really love, the conversation, especially the words that Craig was using around citizenship, and, coming together and, understanding our own roles, as Chris has described his role, Tim has described their role at Unity, that we are, all of us committed to the bigger vision for our community, so that we have amazing people like the people around the table that are able to see their role beyond, achieving the success of their company or their organization, but it's about achieving the success of the community, that we're committed to that greater outcome of the community achieving, of the community solving challenges and problems. And then that's how we come together. And, Calgary Economic Development's role in all of that is to convene and connect and to catalyze. It's our job to bring people together to talk about what are the gaps in our community, what do we need to do to try and address those gaps, and what are the resources that we need, and can we help go out and get those resources? Can we help connect people to companies to spur those ideas? Can we help launch Evolve U? And those kinds of things in our community. So that's our role, is to convene and connect, and then of course to shout from the rooftops what it is that we're doing in Calgary and what the opportunities are here in Calgary. Because it was also said earlier, talent attracts talent, and if we're all committed to this, I personally believe, that if we're knocking it out of the park, if we are building a digital talent ecosystem that is too large for the companies that are here, the rest of the world is going to notice and people are going to show up.
Yeah, that is a fantastic challenge we throw out to the City of London, Sir Peter, And I'll give you the closing remarks for a minute here for the roundtable. We are coming after you. We're looking to leapfrog. What's your parting comments here, Sir Peter, for the City of Calgary?
My parting comments are, you have the ambition. I haven't, as I said, been to Calgary personally, but I've been to Canada on many occasions. And I have to say, I've not told a lot of people, but it's the only place in the world that I'd emigrate to. Maybe there's an opportunity for me to come and help you. But more seriously, look, it has been a fascinating conversation, and I think it really has, to me, brought out the key elements here, whether it's the educational system, the entrepreneurship, the culture. The fact that that it's an environment that I'm hearing is really open to change and a real willingness to change, but that change is taking place all around us. So the reality is, as I said, is we either shape that future, and it seems to me that you're grasping that, and you are, or it will change around you, in which case we then respond. So to my mind, look, it's been a delight to be party to the conversation. The offer is there. It really is a genuine offer, because at the end of the day, I think, Greg, to your point, the ecosystem that we really are all part of is the world in which we live in, whether it's the natural world, whether it's the humanity of all of our people. So it is a genuine offer that actually, we're all here to help each other. And the reason I say that, maybe there is an element of, well, what's in it for me? And that is because when you succeed, then we will be turning to you to say, well, now can you help us?
Well, we welcome that future opportunity, Sir Peter. And I am thrilled and so energized from this conversation. Thank you to each and every one of our roundtable participants. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. I'm surrounded by notes and my jottings of I couldn't keep up with the volume of pieces of information I want to take away and think about, oh my goodness, where do we take this next? And so I think with that, Jim, over to you for the next segment.
Go just yet, Sula. I think I just want to say thank you so much for that. That is a group of people that I could have a conversation with for hours. And I know actually we will continue to have that conversation. So I really appreciate you guiding that conversation, both in the questions that you prepared them for, but also in the moment, understanding what was going through your mind. I took a whole bunch of notes, and I was furiously trying to jump in, but I realized it's not my job here. So that was your job, and you did a fantastic job. What were just a couple of comments, just, as a facilitator of a complex conversation, was there anything that jumped out at you that you wanted to just share with the group that's assembled here? Is there something that you felt was particularly interesting?
Yeah, and like you, as I mentioned, I'm surrounded by notes, and I was really excited when the concept of the energy in Calgary and this idea of what we've got in terms of possibility ahead of us. And as Peter just mentioned there, we can be the disruptors, or we will become the ones being disrupted. And I think what I heard around the roundtable is we have creators, we have got digital talent, we've got K-12, we've got everyone here. We need to think about immersion in a digital environment and ecosystem that starts at the very beginning and will enable us to really be not only relevant, productive, employable in terms of the citizens of Alberta, but even more so leaders. And I think that's the potential opportunity here is it's not only digital talent per se, but so much more and so much more immersive in terms of what the future holds for us.
There was indeed around that table every viewpoint, every experience, and there's many more. One of the other messages that I heard quite clearly, both from Chris and from Joe and Greg, was that we need to continue to be inclusive. We need to continue to have conversations like we've had, but also invite those who may feel like they're not part of the conversation currently. And I think your organization at Accenture, my school at SAIT and SAIT, we really keep that top of mind, that if we create a future vision of a digital society, it has to be inclusive. It has to include everybody. That really came through for me. You did a fantastic, it was great. I knew you would, and I'm just honored to have conversations like this, and I just know, given what's coming, you and I and the team at Accenture, who did an extraordinary job in getting us to this point, I can't thank you enough for you and your team for the work that you've done. So we'll be in touch probably in about a half an hour for what's next. So I'm really appreciative of you taking the time to lead this conversation on a very, very important topic. Thank you very much, Sula.
Thank you.
So I started today promising we would do three things. We would create that global connection, and our friend Peter, Sir Peter, certainly did that in spades. I wanted us to connect into a conversation, bringing many stakeholders and perspectives together. And I think that conversation over 45, 50 minutes was extraordinary beginning of a conversation that we're going to have. And then the final promise I had is that I wanted to seed this conversation and seed this ecosystem with a shared resource. And at SADT, we have this expression, because we've got a lot of ideas coming at us all the time, is that when we want to get tactical, we talk about landing planes. It's how we shift from moving from concept to get the plane on the ground. And so today we're landing a plane, and I'm excited to launch what we call the Digital Talent Ecosystem Playbook. As a foundation, the playbook will provide guidance towards a shared vocabulary that covers digital competencies, digital talent ecosystems, playbooks, and plays. Now, for those of you who have maybe not have seen this, a play is exactly what you think it is. It's a tactical initiative. It's a set of activities that we can implement towards overcoming our digital talent challenges. It moves the ball down the field. It's how we navigate our world around it. And it's how we act as a team. And so, as we heard today, even getting aligned on what does an ecosystem of digital mean is a challenge. And so what we've done is decided to create the playbook that will offer plays to help share and open this to the ecosystem. So the playbook is going to offer 2 plays as a starting point. The first, as you've heard many people mention on the conversation, Sir Peter and others, we're adopting a framework the first play is about adopting a framework for digital skills and readiness, so that we can have a common vocabulary, a common language, and a common measure for, are we getting somewhere? Are we getting there? And then the second play that we've seeded the playbook with is what we call digital skills mapping, which focuses on those specific skills to unlock the human potential. So we're calling this an MVP, a minimum viable playbook, because it's going to be a living, breathing, editable document. And it's not prescriptive. It's meant to be a discussion point, evoke conversations, innovations, and experiments. And so we will constantly iterate this playbook and evolve with your specific input as we strengthen our digital talent ecosystem. Because, you know, every engine needs a flywheel. At the Rainforest, we used to have our lunch without a lunch, and that was the flywheel through which we turned the ecosystem forward. And I hope that the playbook can, in the future, be the center point for conversations and collaborating, as we've talked about in our discussions, across the ecosystem to accelerate digital skills in Southern Alberta. So each of you will receive access to the playbook in an email that's going to follow this conversation. We'll also drop a link to the playbook right in the chat as we speak. And what we're going to do is use this playbook as a call to action for future meetups. I invite you to edit it. I invite you to evoke it and co-author the next play or a play that worked for you. The playbook is going to be published under a Creative Commons license, which that means that it's editable, it's shareable, remix as you see, use it as you wish. Implement the plays in your organization. Bring the lessons back to the ecosystem so that we can learn and iterate. The health and maturity of our community's digital talent will be reflected in this digital talent playbook. We're committed. You heard the conversation from Sula about commitment. SAIT is committed. And as one catalyst to all of you, we share this baton. So I want to thank all of you for participating on this hot end of June day. Extremely pleased that you could spend this time with us. My sincere thanks to Sir Peter Estlin, our newest friend, who we're going to certainly invite over. Sula, for your incredible facilitation and work with your team at Accenture. Chris Foster from TC, Court, from your great work at Calgary Economic Development. My partner in crime, Greg Hart. Joe Pittman from Calgary Board of Education, and Tim Wong from Unity, who brought an amazing perspective from their company. Thank you to the Playbook team. There's a group who shaped this from start to finish, who did extraordinary effort in shaping this first vision. And one more thing, I want to thank you again to Accenture for their guidance in this playbook, and to the companies that reached out, put up their hand and said, we'll help put this first plan together. Calgary Economic Development, Synovus, Exergy, Combine, Halcyon, Inception U, Wealthsimple, Nutrien, Cement, and Mount Royal. And finally, to my friends at Xerox Xdocs, you did an extraordinary job over last minute putting this beautiful document together. I can't thank you enough for the work you're doing. And the last shout out is to my dear friends here at Maven Media. They make this look easy. They make it look incredibly professional, and they're just a delight to work with. I thank you very much. And the last thing I'll say, hold in your calendars September 23rd for our inaugural Digital Talent Ecosystem Gathering right here at the Oddfellows Building at the School for Advanced Digital Technology. Let's light this ballroom up. Details to come. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us today. Have a good day.